You have been working, really working. Early mornings, late screens, the particular exhaustion that comes not from laziness but from genuine effort sustained over time. And yet the number in your account at the end of each month keeps arriving at roughly the same place it arrived the month before. Not from lack of trying, from something else entirely. That is the part nobody explains. The advice you have been given assumes the problem lives in your calendar. Work harder, wake earlier, build better habits, optimize the hours, and so you do, you genuinely do. For a stretch of days it feels like something is finally moving. Then quietly, without announcement, you return to baseline. Same ceiling, same number, same quiet frustration you cannot quite name out loud because you know how hard you have been trying. Here is what no productivity framework, no morning routine, no goal-setting system ever addresses. Every night while you sleep, your brain is running a program, not a metaphor, an actual neurological process. It reviews the day and files it against a deeply held internal definition of who you are in relation to money. And if that definition says you are someone who struggles, someone who almost makes it, someone for whom financial ease is something other people have, then every gain you made that day gets quietly recategorized, not erased, filed, under the wrong identity. Your effort is real. The problem is the program it runs into each night. By the time you finish this audio, you will understand exactly what that program is and where it came from. You will understand how the hours you are already unconscious become the most powerful reprogramming window available to you. Not someday, starting tonight. Chapter 1. Your hustle is overwriting nothing. Every civilization that has ever risen from the earth has carried the same quiet mystery inside it. Across every era, in every corner of the world, there have always been two kinds of people living side by side. People who work with equal ferocity, equal hours, equal hunger, and yet arrive at vastly different destinations. The ones who pull ahead are not always sharper. They are not always luckier, but they share something the majority never think to examine. Something that operates not in the daylight of their decisions, but in the deeper architecture beneath. This is not a new discovery. Versions of it have been buried in monasteries, whispered in market squares, and rediscovered by ordinary people who simply refused to accept that effort alone was the whole answer. You are one of those people. You would not be here if you were not already asking the right question. And the question is this: why does everything you do during the day seem to reset by morning? You have had a week like this. You know exactly what it feels like. Monday through Friday you were disciplined. You tracked your spending. You took the extra shift or pitched the extra client. You said no to the dinner out and yes to the side project at 11 at night when everyone else was already asleep. By Friday evening, you felt the pull to check your account. Not out of anxiety exactly, more like a confirmation, a small reward for all that forward motion. You open the app, and the number just sits there, unchanged in a way that feels almost personal. That feeling is not discouragement. It is data, and this chapter is going to show you what it is actually measuring. Here is the open loop you need to carry with you. There is a signal running underneath everything you think and earn and decide. You cannot hear it the way you hear music, but it is broadcasting constantly. By the end of this chapter, you will understand what that signal is. You will also understand why every tactic you have ever tried has been attempting to shout over it rather than change it. Hold that idea loosely for now. It will come into focus. Most people believe the formula is simple. Want more money, do more work. Work harder, earn more, keep more. At the surface level, this is not wrong. Action does produce results. But here is where it fractures. You have probably already done the work. You have already tried the budgets and the side income and the savings challenges. And yet something keeps pulling you back to a ceiling that feels fixed. As if the floor of your checking account and the ceiling of your ambition are both nailed to the same invisible structure. That structure has a name. Call it your wealth identity. Your wealth identity is not your income. It is not your credit score. It is the number your nervous system considers normal. It is the financial reality your body expects to return to after any temporary spike or dip. Think of it like a thermostat set to a specific temperature. You can open a window in winter and let the cold air flood in, but the furnace will kick back on. You can crank the heat on a summer day and feel the difference for an hour, but the system will correct. The thermostat does not care about your intentions. It only knows its setting. Your hustle is the cold air. Your subconscious wealth script is the furnace. Now here is what nobody told you. This is the thing that makes the whole picture shift. That thermostat was not set by you. Not consciously. It was set in childhood, in the conversations you overheard at the dinner table, in the way your family talked about people who had money, in the stories your community told about what was possible for someone like you. By the time you were old enough to have an opinion about money, the setting was already locked in. You have been living inside someone else's financial expectation ever since. That is not blame, that is mechanics. Remember the life you were living from 3 years back without polishing the memory. Not your bank account, your belief. What did you quietly assume your financial life was allowed to look like? Did you believe that comfort was something that happened to other families? Did you assume that a certain amount of struggle was just the texture of your particular life? You can leave that unspoken for anyone else to hear, but sit with it for a moment. Because somewhere between then and now, you have probably worked harder. You may have earned more, but that core assumption, that interior setting, has it actually moved? For most people, the honest answer is no. And that gap between the effort and the movement is exactly what this book exists to close. Here is a story about a man named Marcus. Marcus was 31 years old and ran a small landscaping company he had built from nothing. He drove a truck he was proud of. He had 4 employees. On paper, the business looked functional, but Marcus could never seem to keep more than 3 months of savings before something came along to level it back to zero. A bad storm season, equipment repairs, a client who disappeared without paying. He told himself he needed better clients, better contracts, a better system. So he hired a business coach. He rewrote his pricing. He fired 2 clients who were costing him more energy than they returned. Within 8 months, his revenue had climbed by 40%. He checked his savings account on a Tuesday morning in November, expecting finally to see the proof of all that work. 3 months of reserves, exactly where it always was. The coach had fixed his strategy. Nobody had touched the belief underneath it. The belief that Marcus had carried since he was 9 years old, watching his father shake his head at the end of every month. The belief that said, "This is as far as people like us go." The strategy changed. The signal did not. Marcus is not unusual. Marcus is the rule. Your conscious mind is a spectacular tool. It can read books and build spreadsheets and negotiate salaries and identify opportunity with real precision. But it is working a day shift. It clocks in when you wake up and it clocks out when you sleep. And when it leaves, the night shift takes over. The night shift runs on something older and far more powerful. Neuroscientists estimate that somewhere between 95 and 99% of your daily behavior is driven by subconscious programming, patterns so deeply installed that they operate without your awareness or permission. Your wealth identity lives in that territory. It is not a thought you think. It is the water you swim in, and the water does not care how hard you are kicking. This is why effort without reprogramming is Sisyphean. You know the Greek myth. Sisyphus pushes the boulder up the mountain with everything he has, every single day. But the boulder does not stay at the top. The mountain does not change its slope. He wakes up and the boulder is exactly where it was. Most people reading their bank account on a Friday night know exactly how Sisyphus felt. But here is the turn. This is where everything shifts. Sisyphus failed not because he lacked strength. He failed because he kept trying to solve a gravity problem with muscle. The moment you understand that your wealth ceiling is a subconscious setting and not a talent deficit, the entire strategy changes. You are no longer trying to push harder. You are learning to work with the system that runs while you are not watching. You are learning to speak to the architect who works the night shift. And here is something that will feel surprising at first. The most powerful access point to that subconscious architect is not a seminar or a vision board or a morning routine. It is sleep. The hours between when you close your eyes and when you open them again are not empty hours. They are the hours when the subconscious is most available, most receptive, and least defended by the critical reasoning your waking mind uses to filter out new information. Right now, you might be treating those hours as recovery time, necessary maintenance, a biological tax. This book is going to show you they are something else entirely. They are the frequency window, the brief nightly interval when the noise of conscious resistance drops low enough that a new signal can actually reach the deeper code. Down the line in this book, you will run into an idea about how long it takes to change a financial habit that breaks with the story most people inherited. When that idea snaps into focus, it starts changing how you actually spend your nights. For now, let this land. You are not behind because you are not trying. You are exactly where your subconscious expected you to be. Effort does not override the script. It only exhausts the person running it. The boulder is not the problem, the slope is. And the slope can be changed, but not in daylight, not through discipline alone, and not by any strategy your conscious mind can execute at 10 in the morning with a cup of coffee and good intentions. The reprogramming happens somewhere else, somewhere quieter, somewhere you already visit every single night without realizing what you could be doing while you are there. What happens to wealth identity while you sleep? Chapter 2: The Ceiling You Cannot See Awake. Almost everyone believes the same thing about money. They believe that if they want more of it, they need to do more to get it, more hours, more hustle, more sacrifice, more strategy. Most people reading every financial book, watching every motivational video, and building every spreadsheet believe this completely. They are wrong. Not wrong in the way that needs a small correction. Wrong in the way that means everything they are building is resting on a cracked foundation. The reason this particular wrongness is so hard to see is that the effort itself feels like proof it is working. You are moving. You must be getting somewhere. But what if the movement is circular? That question is going to stay with you for a while. Let it. You were asked at the end of the last chapter what happens to wealth identity while you sleep. That is not a poetic question. It is a mechanical one. While you are awake, you are managing. You are executing habits, repeating affirmations, building discipline, chasing milestones. You are doing exactly what you were told to do. But while you are asleep, Something older than your discipline is running its own calculations. Those calculations have been running, uninterrupted, since before you were old enough to read. Look back at the person you were from 3 years back without polishing the memory. Think about what you were earning, what you were saving, what you told yourself you were capable of. Now think about today. Some things have changed. But the number, the ceiling, the highest point you have allowed yourself to reach or imagine reaching, how far has that moved? If the answer makes you uncomfortable, stay with that feeling. It is pointing at something real. Here is the thing about a ceiling you cannot see. It does not feel like a ceiling. It feels like a decision. It feels like you chose to stop there. It feels like something went wrong, or something was not quite right yet, or like you need one more piece before you are ready to move higher. It feels entirely rational. And that is exactly why it holds. Before you were 7 years old, your brain was operating in a state of near constant absorption. Neuroscientists call this the theta state, a low-frequency brainwave pattern that functions less like conscious learning and more like direct installation. A child in theta does not filter what they receive. They do not evaluate whether the information is accurate or fair or even true. They receive. They record. They file. What gets filed during those years does not stay as a memory you can consciously recall and examine. It becomes architecture. It becomes the shape of the room you live inside without knowing the room has walls. What did you receive before you were 7? Not what you were taught. Not what anyone intended to teach you. What you absorbed. The sigh your mother made when the bill arrived. The tone your father used when talking about people who had more. The way money was named in your house, whether it was fought over, hidden, celebrated, mourned, or never mentioned at all. The way the adults around you carried themselves when they were near it or near the absence of it. All of that went in. None of it was screened, and all of it is still in there, quietly setting the upper limit on what you believe at a level below belief that you deserve. This is what a wealth ceiling is. It is not a number someone assigned you. It is a recorded set of impressions that your subconscious mind has organized into a rule. The rule does not sound like a rule. It sounds like intuition. It sounds like realism. It sounds like you being responsible. Now here is where the radio comes in. Imagine that somewhere inside you there is a specific frequency, a signal that corresponds to exactly the financial life you want. The income, the stability, the ease, the sense of having enough and then some. That signal exists. It is not mystical. It is the version of you that operates from a different internal architecture, one not built around scarcity and caution and the quiet assumption that too much is dangerous. That signal is real, and it is always broadcasting. But you cannot receive it clearly. Between you and that signal there is static, constant, low-grade background static. The kind that does not announce itself loudly enough to demand your attention, but that runs underneath everything, distorting the transmission. You hear the signal through it and you think something feels off. You move toward the life you say you want and something pulls, quietly, almost imperceptibly back. You make progress. And then at a certain point, things start to go sideways in small ways. The expense you did not see coming. The relationship that costs you. The opportunity that almost worked. You chalk it up to luck or timing or the economy or the fact that you are still learning. The real reason is simpler and harder to accept. The static is winning. Here is what makes the static so difficult to address through conscious effort alone. When you are awake, you are operating in beta brainwave frequency, alert, rational, analytical. You can set goals. You can manage behavior. You can force discipline long enough to produce results. But the static is not located in the beta layer. It is installed in the deeper architecture. Beta state effort cannot reach it. This is why smart, motivated, genuinely hardworking people, maybe you are one of them, hit the same ceiling over and over again despite doing everything right on the surface. They are fighting in the wrong room. They are shouting over the static rather than silencing it. Meet a woman named Claire. She was 29 when she started her second business. The first one had grown to a point she was proud of and then quietly fallen apart in a way she could not entirely explain. Clients had drifted. A partnership had soured. She had blamed the timing. She had blamed herself for not knowing enough. So with the second business, she studied harder, planned more carefully, hired a coach. She did everything the first version of her had failed to do. The business grew. And then, at almost exactly the same revenue point as the first one, things began to fray. Different circumstances this time. Same ceiling. She sat across from a therapist one afternoon and said, "I think I have a limit I cannot see." The therapist asked her to describe what money had meant in her house growing up. Claire talked for 40 minutes without stopping. Halfway through, she started crying, not because the memories were painful, but because she recognized them. She recognized that the rule she had been living by was not hers. It had been handed to her before she had the capacity to refuse it. What Claire understood that afternoon is what most people spend decades discovering if they discover it at all. The ceiling is not made of circumstance. It is made of identity. And identity does not change through effort. It changes through reprogramming. This distinction is the one that separates people who grind indefinitely from people who actually move. Grinding harder inside a fixed identity boundary produces more exhaustion, not more wealth. The boundary does not care how motivated you are. It was installed before motivation was even a concept you understood. It operates beneath the level where motivation lives. This is the core diagnosis of where you are right now if you have been working hard and still feel like something invisible is holding you back. You are not lazy. You are not unlucky. You are not missing the right strategy. You are running a new agenda on an old operating system, and the old system keeps overriding the new commands. A little later, we will get to a point about sleep, specifically about what the sleeping mind is capable of accepting and installing that breaks with the story most people inherited. Once that lands, it immediately changes how you use every night between now and the end of your life. But before you can receive what sleep has to offer, you have to understand what is blocking the signal. The static has a source, it has a structure, and it is not as permanent as it feels. The sleeping architect, the part of you that runs the night shift, that reorganizes and consolidates everything the waking mind experienced that day, does not have to keep building the same room. It can be given different instructions, not through willpower, not through discipline, through something quieter and more precise than either of those things. The ceiling you cannot see awake is visible in the dark. So the question is not whether you can raise it. The question is whether you know yet what it is built from. Chapter 3. Sleep is your only unguarded door. Trying harder to think your way into wealth is exactly what keeps you poor. That sounds like an excuse to stop working, so let it sit for one more second. It is not an excuse. It is an observation about where the real block lives. Your conscious mind, the part that makes plans and tracks budgets and reads books like this one, is not the part running your financial life. Something deeper is. And that deeper part is not available to you most of the day. It has a guard posted at the door. But every single night, for a few slow seconds at the edge of sleep, that guard steps away. The door swings open, and almost everyone on earth walks right past it without knowing it was ever there. This chapter is about that door. More precisely, it is about what happens in the narrow corridor between waking and sleep, why that corridor exists and why it is the single most valuable real estate in your entire day. Not the morning, not the hustle hours, the threshold. Here is the question this chapter will eventually answer. If the door opens every night, why does almost no one walk through it? Hold that question. It matters more than it seems right now. You already know the conscious effort loop. You have lived inside it. You wake up, you commit, you grind, and then 6 months later the numbers in your account look almost identical to where they started. The effort was real. The intention was genuine. But somewhere between the plan and the result, something absorbed the energy and sent you back to zero. That something has a name. Think of it as a setting, not a mindset, a setting, like the temperature on a thermostat. You can open every window in the house, but the heating system will always bring the room back to whatever number is locked into that dial. The windows are your conscious actions. The thermostat is your identity around money. And your identity was written a long time ago, mostly by things you were not old enough to question, in moments you may not even remember. So the question from the last chapter was not whether you can raise the ceiling. The question was what the ceiling is built from. Now you know. It is built from accepted information. Specifically, information that arrived before your critical mind was strong enough to say, wait, let me think about that first. It arrived as fact. It settled in, and it has been quietly governing your decisions ever since. Return to the person you were from 3 years back without polishing the memory. Not geographically, financially. Be honest about whether the number in your account today is as different as the effort between then and now deserves. If the answer makes you pause, good. That pause is important. It means you are already sensing what this chapter is about to show you. The gap between effort and result is not a discipline problem. It is a signal problem. When your subconscious wealth setting says there is a ceiling, it does not broadcast that as a sentence you can argue with. It broadcasts it as static, low, constant, invisible interference that degrades every clear signal you try to send. You set the intention, you make the plan passes through the static, and what arrives at the other end is weaker, slower, diluted. Not stopped, just reduced, just enough to keep the result just below the threshold. That is why the effort feels like it almost works, because it almost does. The signal is reaching the tower. The static is eating the last mile. What Marcus found was not motivation. He was not short on motivation. Marcus had worked minimum wage at a warehouse outside of Cincinnati for 4 years straight. He showed up early. He took extra shifts. He studied logistics certifications on his lunch break with a sandwich in one hand and a binder in the other. The problem was not effort. The problem was that every night he fell asleep the same way, with the same thoughts cycling through the same conclusions, worried about the credit card, calculating whether the check would clear, replaying a conversation with a manager who had told him, years before, that he was not management material. He was not thinking these things on purpose. They were just the last station playing before the signal went out. And then a friend of his, a woman named Diane who had worked her way from retail into owning 2 small commercial properties in 7 years, said something to him that he almost dismissed. She said, "The last thing you think about before you sleep is the last instruction you give your mind before it starts working without you." Marcus thought that sounded like a poster in a dentist's office. He tried it anyway, not because he believed it, because he had already tried everything he did believe in and the number in his account had not moved. He had nothing to lose by changing 12 minutes at the end of his day. What he changed was simple, not what he did during the day, not his morning routine, not his productivity system, not his diet, just the thin corridor from wakefulness into sleep. He learned about the hypnagogic state. He started working with it deliberately. 18 months later, he crossed 6 figures for the first time in his life, and the ceiling he crossed it through was not built from new skills. It was built from a different signal. So what is the hypnagogic state exactly? Hypnagogia is the transitional zone your brain enters in the minutes before you fully fall asleep. Your eyes are closed, your body is relaxing, but your conscious mind has not fully surrendered yet. It is dimming, and in that dimming, something remarkable happens. The critical faculty, the part of your brain that filters incoming information and decides whether to accept or reject it, begins to step back. Its grip loosens. It is not gone, but it is no longer standing at full attention. This matters enormously. During your waking hours, the critical faculty is the guard at the gate. Every new belief, every new idea about who you are or what you are worth has to pass through that gate. And the guard has preferences. It has been doing this job for a long time. It knows what matches your existing identity and what looks like a threat to it. Anything that does not match gets questioned, softened, or turned away. That is not a flaw. It is a protection system. But it is also why affirmations whispered at noon, while you are fully awake, often do so little. The guard intercepts them. At the hypnagogic threshold, the guard is half asleep. Information that enters in that window bypasses the rejection mechanism. It moves directly into the territory where your wealth-setting lives. This is not metaphor. Sleep researchers have documented for decades that the brain in hypnagogia shows elevated theta wave activity, the same wave state associated with deep meditation, creative insight, and high receptivity to suggestion. The military has studied it. Athletes have used it. And people who built wealth from nothing have been using it intuitively, often without knowing why, for as long as there have been people who built wealth from nothing. The sleeping architect does not know you are watching. That phrase appeared in the first chapter of this book almost like a warning. At the time, it was about the passive builder of your limits. Now it becomes something different. Now it is an instruction. If the architect works while you sleep, the question is not how to fight the architect. The question is how to hand the architect a new set of plans just before the work shift begins. That is the night shift. And this is how you clock in. The transition into sleep is the one daily window where the subconscious accepts new programming without resistance. That is the revelation this chapter has been building toward, not a motivational claim, a neurological fact dressed in plain language. The window is real, the mechanism is real. The only variable is whether you use it deliberately or surrender it to whatever noise was left over from your day. Now close the loop on the earlier question. If the door opens every night, why does almost no one walk through it? Because no one told them it was a door. It looked like the end of the day. It felt like rest. It seemed passive. People treat the approach to sleep as a wind down, a scroll, a final exhale, the least productive minutes of a productive day. And so they hand those minutes to whatever had the most momentum. The worry, the replay, the bill calculation. The comparison to someone else's highlight reel. Without meaning to, they reinscribe the exact setting they were trying to overwrite. You do not have to do that anymore. Further on, we will get to a point about repetition and change that breaks with the story most people inherited. When that becomes clear, it immediately changes how long you think real reprogramming actually takes. For now, understand this. The static is not the truth about you. It is an old recording, made when you were too young to choose a different one. The clean signal of who you are capable of becoming has been there the whole time. You have simply been trying to broadcast it at the wrong hour, through a filter designed to block it. The night shift is where the real work happens. The day shift just needs to keep you alive long enough to show up for it. What will you hand the architect tonight? Chapter 4. Why Affirmations Fail After Midnight. Right now, something is draining. Not from your bank account, from the account that feeds it. The one inside you. Every night you fall asleep without giving the right instruction to the part of your mind that builds your financial life. That night does not sit still. It compounds. The version of you that could have existed 6 months from now gets slightly further away. Not because you are lazy, not because you lack drive, because the input you have been sending down into sleep is landing at the wrong level. The words hit the surface, and the surface sends them back. That is the question this chapter is going to answer. Why do the words stop working after midnight? And what does actually work once the lights are off and your conscious mind steps aside? The answer is not what most people who teach this have told you. Think about how many times you have done it. You lie in bed, eyes closed or staring at the ceiling, and you say the words, quietly or with conviction, trying to feel them. I am wealthy. I am financially free. Money flows to me easily. You say them until sleep comes or until some other thought takes over. Then morning arrives. The account is the same. The anxiety about the account is the same. You tell yourself you need to be more consistent. You tell yourself you need to believe it more. So you try harder the next night, and it still does not work. Here is what you have not been told. The problem is not your commitment. The problem is the level at which those words are landing. Imagine a radio tower. It broadcasts a signal, strong and clear, out into the air. But if your receiver is tuned to the wrong frequency, the signal never arrives. It exists, it transmits, it travels the full distance, and you hear nothing but static. That is what happens when you repeat affirmation language to a mind that has not been tuned to receive it. The words exist. They travel. They mean nothing to the architecture below. Most people stop asking the right question here. They ask, am I saying the right words? The real question is, am I reaching the right place? Hold that question open. You will come back to it. But first, meet someone who learned this the hard way. Her name was 𝗜𝗓𝗧𝗘. She was 29, working as a project coordinator for a logistics company in Charlotte. She had been practicing affirmations for 11 months before she arrived at her breaking point. 𝗜𝗓𝗧𝗘 was methodical. She kept a notebook. She wrote her affirmations in the morning and read them aloud at night. She had a specific phrase she had crafted herself, one she was genuinely proud of. I am a woman who earns abundantly and manages money with confidence. She said it with her hand on her chest. She said it in the mirror. She said it in bed softly until her breath slowed and sleep came. 11 months, the same job, the same paycheck, the same low-grade dread every time the rent cleared her account. What broke her was not failure. It was a conversation with her cousin Marcus. Marcus had quietly paid off his car loan, moved into a better apartment, and started investing for the first time, all within 18 months of what he called doing the night work. He was not a guru. He was not selling anything. He was a 32-year-old electrician from the same family, same background, same starting point. 𝗜𝗓𝗧𝗘 asked him what affirmations he was using. He told her he was not using affirmations. What he was doing was something different. Something that operates below the level of language entirely. Before you hear what Marcus was doing, sit with 𝗜𝗓𝗧𝗘 for one more moment. Because her story is not a story about a woman who failed. It is a story about a method that was failing her. There is a crucial difference. The method she was using, repeating carefully chosen words at the threshold of sleep, was asking her conscious mind to overwrite something her conscious mind cannot reach. Language lives in the upper floors. You can rearrange language endlessly. You can choose better words, stronger words, more precise words. But the floor where your financial identity actually lives is not a language floor. It is a feeling floor, and you cannot speak to it in sentences. Picture the person you were from 3 years back without polishing the memory. Not just financially, think about how money felt to you. Was it tight? Embarrassing? Was there a knot that came when you thought about your balance? Now think about whether that feeling has actually changed, even if your situation has shifted somewhat. Most people find the feeling stays stubbornly close to what it was. The numbers may move a little. The anxiety does not. That is the feeling floor refusing to update. That is the subconscious blueprint sitting exactly where it was set, often in childhood, reinforced daily, undisturbed by the words you send down to it at night. Here is why that matters in the specific context of sleep. When you move towards sleep, your brain shifts. The busy, verbal, analytical part begins to quiet. The part that guards your deeply held assumptions loosens its grip. This is the window, the actual window, when your wealth identity can be reached. Researchers who study sleep onset have documented for decades that this threshold is unusually receptive to new input. The architecture is open. The night shift begins. And what you hand to that open architecture is everything. Delia was handing it words. Words are the product of the conscious mind. When you hand the sleeping architecture a sentence, it processes that sentence through the same filters that built your current beliefs. The filter recognizes, "I am a woman who earns abundantly," as a claim that contradicts what it already knows to be true. And so it does what any good filter does. It rejects the foreign input. Worse than that, it reinforces the rejection. Every night you send a claim that conflicts with the existing identity. The subconscious mechanism that holds that identity gets slightly more practiced at dismissing it. You are not neutrally failing. You are actively strengthening the old pattern by repeatedly bumping against it with a tool that cannot get through. What can get through is feeling. Marcus was not saying anything before he slept. He was doing something closer to remembering. He had a specific practice. The full protocol is laid out step by step in Chapter 6, but the core of it was this. He would locate a moment from his actual life when he had felt the specific sensation of financial ease. Not wealth, not luxury, just ease. The feeling of a bill being paid without panic. The feeling of choosing something at a restaurant without calculating whether he could afford it. Small moments, real moments, moments his nervous system already recognized as true because they had already happened, and he would hold that feeling, not describe it, not narrate it, not repeat a phrase about it. Simply hold the felt sense of it, the way your body knows the feeling of warm water, and let it deepen as sleep arrived. The sleeping architect received something it recognized, something that did not trip the filter because it was not a claim. It was a memory, a real frequency, not a constructed signal. The architecture could work with it, and it did. Here is the principle underneath this. The subconscious mind does not process declarations. It processes experiences. When you tell it something, it evaluates whether that something is consistent with what it already knows. When you bring it an experience, even a remembered one, held in the body as a living sensation, it treats that experience as real data. It updates, not dramatically, not overnight, but consistently, night after night. The felt sense of financial ease begins to be part of what the architecture recognizes as you. This is the distinction that almost no one makes when they teach this material. They stay at the level of language because language is what conscious humans are comfortable with. Choose better words. Say them with more conviction. Write them down. Record them. play them on a loop. All of that is activity at the wrong altitude. The altitude you need is lower, quieter, and more honest than any sentence you could construct. Now close the loop you have been holding. The right place to reach is the identity layer, not the belief layer, not the language layer, the layer that decides below awareness what kind of person you are and what kind of person you are not. And the way to reach it is not through declaration. It is through felt experience delivered at the exact moment the gate is open. This is why affirmations fail after midnight. Midnight is not a language environment. It is a frequency environment. And static, no matter how well worded, is still static. Soon, we will get to a point about repetition, the idea that saying something more often makes it more true to your subconscious that breaks with the story most people inherited. After that clicks, it immediately changes exactly how you spend those final minutes before sleep. But for now, the question that carries you forward is simpler and more personal than any technique. What does financial ease actually feel like in your body? And when is the last time you felt it? Chapter 5. The Architect Who Works Your Night Shift. Trying harder to change your financial life while ignoring sleep is like handing a master builder a set of blueprints every morning and burning them every night. That sounds like an exaggeration. It is not. Every night, while you lie still, a version of you continues working, sorting, reinforcing, constructing. Whatever you handed that worker last is what gets built into the structure of who you are tomorrow. Most people spend 12 hours chasing change and then hand their subconscious 12 hours of static, fear, and reruns of the day's losses. And then they wonder why nothing sticks. You have heard the question before, the one this chapter picks up from. What does financial ease actually feel like in your body? When is the last time you felt it? Hold that. Before this chapter ends, you are going to understand exactly where that feeling goes, why it keeps disappearing by morning, and what you can begin doing tonight to stop losing it. The answer lives in what happens between the moment your eyes close and the moment they open again. There is a craftsman inside you. You did not hire him. You cannot fire him. He reports for duty every single night without exception, and he has only one job. He takes the raw material of everything you experienced, felt, and believed throughout the day, and he builds it into your identity while you sleep. Not your memory of the day. Your identity. The story you carry about who you are and what is possible for you. He does not question the material. He does not filter for quality. He builds with whatever you give him. This is the sleeping architect. And right now, if you are honest with yourself, you have probably been handing him rubble. Think about what fills the last hour before you sleep. The news. The social media feed that reminds you of everything you have not done. A mental replay of a conversation that went wrong, a bill you did not expect, a comparison between where you are and where someone else seems to be. You are not doing this on purpose. Nobody does it on purpose. But every one of those inputs becomes raw material, and the architect does not waste anything. Here is where the science stops being abstract and starts being personal. During REM sleep, the deepest and most active phase, the one most people cut short when they set an alarm at 6 in the morning, your brain is not resting. It is running. Neurons are firing in patterns that resemble waking consciousness more closely than any other sleep stage. Your brain is essentially rehearsing, and what it rehearses most intensely is whatever had the most emotional weight attached to it when you went under, not the facts of your day, the feelings. That distinction matters more than almost anything else in this book. Your brain during REM is not building an archive. It is building a self. Neuroscientists describe this consolidation process as the way the brain decides what is worth keeping at the level of identity rather than the level of event. An event is something that happened to you. Identity is something you believe about yourself so deeply that you act from it without thinking. During those REM cycles, your sleeping architect is making exactly that decision. This stays as event, that becomes identity, and he is making it every single night, which means every single night is a vote. Every night, you are casting a vote for who you will be tomorrow morning. When you reach for your phone, check your account balance, make a spending decision, or choose whether to send that email, you are acting from whoever woke up in your bed. And most people are voting without knowing they have a ballot. Meet a woman named Claudia. Claudia ran a small tailoring business out of a converted garage in a city where rent never stopped climbing. She was good at her work. People drove 40 minutes to sit in her chair because nobody else listened the way she listened. But Claudia had a number in her head, a ceiling, and she could never get past it. Every time her income edged close to what she privately thought of as too much for someone like her, something would slip. A client would disappear. An unexpected cost would arrive. She would undercharge on a big order out of guilt she could not name. She had seen a therapist, read 4 books, written goals on index cards she taped to her bathroom mirror. Nothing moved the ceiling. What nobody had told Claudia was this. Every night she spent the last 30 minutes of her day reviewing everything that had gone wrong, calculating how far she still was from safe, and falling asleep with her nervous system in a quiet state of alarm. Her sleeping architect took that alarm and built it in, not as an event she was having, as a fact about her, the fact that money was precarious, the fact that more would be taken, the fact that ease was temporary and probably undeserved. Her ceiling was not a belief she held consciously. It was a wall her own architect had been constructing brick by brick, every night for years. One small shift changed everything, but not overnight, and not the way self-help books usually describe. Claudia started ending her evenings differently, not with affirmations she did not believe, not with a rigid ritual that felt like homework. She simply spent 10 quiet minutes before sleep letting herself remember, in real sensory detail, a moment when work felt easy and the money felt clean. Not imagined success, actual memory, the feel of fabric moving right under her hands, a client-specific laugh when the fit was exactly right, the particular afternoon light in her garage when she had finished something she was proud of and the invoice was already paid. She fed the architect different material. Within 3 months, Claudia's ceiling had not been smashed. It had simply become irrelevant. She raised her rates not through discipline, but through a quiet confidence that felt, in her words, like it had always been there and she had just stopped arguing with it. The principle underneath Claudia's story does not require you to believe in anything mystical. It requires only that you take seriously what the science of sleep is already telling you. REM sleep consolidates identity, not just memory. Identity. That is the core of this chapter. It is worth sitting with for a moment before moving forward. Cast your mind back to life 3 years ago and keep it plain, not geographically, but internally. What did you believe about money that you no longer believe today? What ceiling did you live under back then that has since moved, even slightly? Almost certainly, some shift happened. And almost certainly, it was not purely the result of willpower or strategy. Something changed in what felt true about you at a level below your conscious decisions. Something the architect rebuilt while you slept. The question is whether you want to leave that rebuilding to chance. The architect is not waiting for you to give him permission. He is already working. He worked last night. He will work tonight. He is not idle during the hours you forget about. He is your most consistent employee. And if you have never thought about what you hand him before you close your eyes, you have been letting him build from the scraps of whatever the day left behind. Now you know better. So what do you actually give him? This is where most conversations about sleep and the subconscious go thin. They tell you to visualize. They tell you to affirm. They give you scripts to repeat and ask you to believe things you do not yet believe. And when it does not work the way they promised, you feel like you failed a process that was working fine. The problem is not visualization. The problem is emotional specificity. The architect does not respond to words. He responds to the frequency of genuine feeling. There is a profound difference between imagining money arriving and remembering what it felt like the last time something financially good actually happened to you in your specific life, with all its texture and imperfection and realness. Your brain cannot fully distinguish between a vividly remembered experience and a vividly imagined one when the emotional weight is equivalent. This is why athletes who mentally rehearse a physical skill show measurable improvement in performance without touching the equipment. The signal is real whether the event is happening in the present, being reconstructed from the past, or created forward in imagination. What makes the signal real is the feeling underneath it. Reach for the feeling, not the outcome. The feeling. Here is where the radio static from earlier in this book begins to matter differently. Static is not the absence of signal. Static is competing frequencies interfering with each other. Your subconscious at night is trying to tune. What it tunes to depends entirely on what you send it with emotional clarity before you go under. Fear has a frequency. Ease has a frequency. Scarcity has a frequency. And the memory of one afternoon when money moved cleanly and you felt like you belonged in the life you were living, that has a frequency too. A very specific and very powerful one. Feed the architect that frequency. Tonight, not when conditions are perfect, not when you feel better about your finances. Tonight, even if your account balance makes you anxious, find one real memory, one real moment of financial ease, however small, and let yourself live inside it for 10 minutes before you sleep. Later on, we will get to a point about consistency, specifically about how many repetitions it actually takes to move a subconscious ceiling that breaks with the story most people inherited. Once you grasp that turn, it immediately changes how you count your own progress. But for now, close the loop on what you were asked to hold at the start. You wanted to know where the feeling of financial ease goes and why it disappears by morning. Now you know. It disappears because the architect received different instructions. It disappears because the last transmission you sent was one of worry, comparison, or unexamined anxiety. And it will keep disappearing until you treat the final hour of your day as seriously as you treat any other decision about your financial future. The night shift is always running. The only question is who is giving the orders. Chapter 6. The 3-minute window before unconsciousness. Something is leaving you every night, not dramatically, not all at once, but quietly at the exact moment you close your eyes and surrender to sleep. A window opens, and right now, that window is closing on empty. You are losing something more valuable than the hours themselves. You are losing access to the one mechanism that could make every waking effort you put in finally stick. And the cost of missing that window is not just tonight's loss. It compounds. Every morning you wake up and feel the same ceiling pressing down on you. Every month you work hard and still arrive at the same number in your account. Every year you tell yourself next year will be different. That is the compounding cost of a window you did not know existed. There is a reason the grinding never seems to move the ceiling. The mechanism causing the loss is not effort, it is not discipline. It is the precise 3 minutes before you lose consciousness and what your subconscious is receiving during them. That changes tonight. You already know the night shift is running. The last chapter made that clear. The only question was who is giving the orders. This chapter answers that, precisely, step by step. In a way you can use tonight, not someday, not after more preparation tonight. But first, understand why this window matters so much more than any other moment in your day. Your brain does not move from wide awake to fully asleep in one clean step. There is a corridor between those two rooms. Researchers who study sleep architecture call this state hypnagogia, the threshold experience where conscious control softens and the deeper layers of the mind become extraordinarily receptive. Your critical filter begins to dissolve. That is the part of you that evaluates, doubts, and edits incoming information. What passes through in that corridor does not go through the same scrutiny your waking mind applies to everything. It goes directly into the operating layer. The part of you that runs automatically. The part that decides below the surface what you believe you are worth. Here is the open question that matters right now. What is the difference between someone who uses this window intentionally and someone who falls asleep the same way every night without thinking about it? The gap between those two people is not talent, not opportunity, not intelligence. Hold that question, keep it close. Revisit the person you were from 3 years back without polishing the memory. Your income, your account balance, your daily feeling about money. Now think about where you expected to be by now, not the fantasy version, the reasonable version. The version you told yourself was achievable if you just kept going and kept working. Is there a distance between those 2 points? Most people feel that distance but cannot name why it exists. They worked, they tried, they wanted it. And still the gap is there. That distance is the cost of operating without a recalibrated subconscious script. That is what 3 years of the wrong signal playing through the night shift produces. Now here is the corridor. Here is exactly what happens in those 3 minutes. As your body relaxes and your eyes close for the last time, your brainwave frequency begins to drop from the beta range, the alert, analytical state, down through alpha, the relaxed but still conscious state, and then into the first edge of theta. Theta is the corridor. It is where the hypnagogic window lies. In theta, your mind produces imagery and sensation that feels more vivid than thought but less structured than a full dream. You may see colors shifting. You may feel your body grow heavy. You may hear your own name said in a voice that is clearly internal but feels external. This is the moment. This is the most neurologically receptive state your mind enters while you are still partially conscious. And most people fill it with worry. That is not a judgment. It is a pattern. The day presses in. The bill, the conversation that went wrong, the number in the account that is lower than it should be. Those images and feelings are the last signal your subconscious receives before the night shift takes over, and the night shift treats them as instructions. What would happen if you replaced those signals deliberately? Here is the sequence. 3 minutes, executed in this exact order. The first minute is release, not meditation, not emptying your mind, release. You take 3 slow breaths, and with each exhale, you let the day fall away from your body, not by forcing it out, but by giving it a destination. Imagine each exhale carries the tension of the day out through your fingertips and your feet. This is not metaphor for its own sake. Your nervous system responds to directed imagery. When you give the tension a physical direction, the body follows. The physical release is the prerequisite. You cannot access the hypnagogic window while your body is still holding the day's static. The release clears the frequency. The second minute is installation. This is where the wealth identity signal enters. You are not going to visualize a mansion. You are not going to picture a bank statement. Those are outcomes, and outcomes belong to the conscious, planning mind. What you are going to do is feel the sensation of being someone who has already crossed the threshold. This is a crucial distinction. Not what you want to have, what it feels like to already be the person who has it. There is a specific quality to that feeling. It is not excitement. Excitement belongs to people who are surprised by good news. The feeling you are reaching for is quieter than that. It is the feeling of normalcy around wealth. The feeling that a certain level of financial security is simply the water you swim in. Safe, expected, unremarkable in the best possible sense. To reach that feeling, use sensory specificity, not vague imagery, concrete sensation. Feel the weight of a pen in your hand as you sign a document that represents a decision you can now make without financial fear. Feel the particular quiet of a morning where the first thought you have is not about money stress. Smell the coffee. Feel the chair under you. Let the morning be ordinary, and let the ordinary contain ease. 20 seconds of that specific, sensory, grounded feeling is worth more than an hour of visualization that stays at the level of image without sensation. This is where the radio static metaphor becomes something useful. In the early chapters, static was the enemy, the noise your subconscious had been tuned to for years, the interference that made waking effort slide off without sticking. But static is just a signal that has not been tuned. Every radio tower that broadcasts static is also capable of broadcasting a clear frequency. The difference is calibration. The second minute of this sequence is calibration. You are not fighting the old signal. You are broadcasting a new one, stronger, during the only window when the receiver is open enough to accept it without resistance. The third minute is sealing. This is the part most people skip because they do not know it exists. After the sensory rehearsal, before sleep fully takes you, there is a brief phase where the mind wants to drift into random imagery. This is natural. This is the corridor deepening. Your job in this third minute is not to control what you see. It is simply to hold one phrase at the edge of your awareness as you drift. One clean, present-tense sentence that carries the identity you are installing, not as a mantra you repeat aggressively. As a background truth you are choosing not to dispute. The sentence should be short. It should be first person. It should name a state of being, not a desire. Something like, I operate from security, not from fear. Or, money flows toward decisions I make clearly. These are not affirmations in the traditional sense. They are not wishes. They are identity statements. The distinction matters because identity operates at the level of belief, while desire operates at the level of wanting. Wanting and believing are not the same state. Your subconscious does not manufacture outcomes that match what you want. It manufactures outcomes that match what it believes is true about you. The sentence you carry into sleep is an edit to that file. Now come back to the question that was left open. What is the difference between the person who uses this window deliberately and the person who falls asleep without thinking about it? The difference is the signal. They both experience the same corridor. They both pass through the hypnagogic window. They both give instructions to the night shift. The only difference is whether those instructions are intentional or accidental. The person who falls asleep replaying the day's stress is giving the night shift a very clear brief, reinforce the pattern of scarcity thinking. The person who follows this 3-minute sequence is giving the night shift a different brief entirely. You have been following an accidental protocol your whole life, every night, without knowing it, and now you know it. Meet a woman named Celeste. She was 31, working as a contracts analyst for a mid-sized logistics company, making a salary she described as technically fine. Technically fine meant she was not in crisis, but she was not building anything either. She had read about financial planning. She understood compound interest the way someone understands the rules of a sport they have never played. One evening, after a particularly expensive month where 3 unexpected bills arrived inside of 8 days, she sat on the edge of her bed feeling something she described later as a particular kind of tired, not sleepy, worn. She decided to try something she had been skeptical about. She ran the release breath, let the day fall out of her. She held the sensory scene. A Tuesday morning, ordinary, her laptop open, a decision being made from surplus instead of shortage. She felt the quiet of it. She held a single sentence as she drifted. I decide from a different place now. She did not wake up rich. The 3 bills were still there, but something in her decision-making over the following weeks began to shift in ways she could not fully attribute to any single action. She started taking phone calls she had been avoiding. She submitted a rate renegotiation she had been sitting on for 4 months, not because she felt magically confident, because she felt like someone who would do those things. The subconscious script had received a new instruction, and the night shift had spent its hours building toward it. The parable is not a promise of instant transformation. It is a demonstration of how the mechanism works when you actually use it. Celeste did not become a different person in one night, but she gave her subconscious architect a blueprint it had never had before, and the architect went to work. As this book keeps moving, we will get to a point about motivation that breaks with the story most people inherited. When that point settles, it immediately changes how you make decisions on the hardest days, but that is ahead. Tonight, the only thing that matters is the window. 3 minutes. Release, installation, sealing. The corridor opens every single night whether you use it or not. The night shift runs whether you give it a clear signal or not. The only variable is you. The question is not whether the window works. The window has always been open. The question is what you are willing to place inside it. Chapter 7. The morning proof your new identity needs. Protecting your sleep work is more important than doing it. That sounds like the kind of thing someone says to excuse laziness. It is not. It is an observation about how the subconscious architecture you built in the dark gets quietly dismantled every single morning, not by accident, not by failure, but by the ordinary mechanical chaos of waking life. Unless you do one specific thing first. You placed something inside the window last night. That is what the previous chapter asked of you. And if you did it, something real happened in the hours that followed. Your sleeping architect went to work. Your night shift ran. But here is what nobody tells you about reprogramming that happens in sleep. It is still fragile when you open your eyes. It is like a photograph that has been exposed but not yet developed. The image exists. The chemistry is in motion, and direct light at the wrong moment will destroy it before it ever fully forms. This chapter is about the 2 minutes that protect everything else you have been building. Here is the open question you need to carry through the next few pages. Why do so many people report that new beliefs feel vivid and real at night, sometimes even during the first hour after waking, but by noon those beliefs feel distant, theoretical, like something they read in a book rather than something that belongs to them? That question has a specific answer, and the answer changes everything about how you structure your mornings. Hold it. You already know what the morning usually looks like. Your phone lights up before your feet hit the floor. Notifications, temperatures, traffic. someone else's urgent need pulling at your attention before you have even fully arrived inside your own body. You are already behind before the day starts, or at least you feel that way. That feeling is not neutral. It is a frequency. And the moment your nervous system locks onto it, it begins broadcasting static over whatever signal the night shift spent hours carefully tuning. This is not a metaphor about stress management. This is a precise mechanical observation about how identity works in the early morning window. Call up the person you were from 3 years back without polishing the memory. Not your career, not your bank account, those are just symptoms. Think about what you believed, quietly and without examination, about what kind of person you were when it came to money. Did you believe somewhere underneath the ambition that money was essentially for other people, that you would always be catching up, that the version of you with financial ease was a future version, perpetually arriving, never quite here? If you are honest, and this chapter asks for honesty, the answer is probably yes. Here is what is worth noticing. That belief did not announce itself. It did not require your agreement. It ran automatically, like a process in the background of a computer you forgot was still open. That background process is exactly what the night shift is designed to rewrite. But rewrites need to be confirmed. Consider a man named David Reyes. David was a facilities coordinator at a mid-sized logistics company, 31 years old, working a job he had slid into rather than chosen. He was not unhappy exactly. He was just consistently, quietly certain that his financial situation was a fixed feature of reality, the way weather is a fixed feature of a city. He started learning about subconscious reprogramming and went through something very close to what this book describes. For 3 weeks he reported vivid, almost disorienting experiences during the hypnagogic state before sleep. He said the new beliefs felt like warm weight, real, physical, settled. And then he said something that stopped the conversation cold. He said the feelings were always gone by lunch, not faded, gone. He would arrive at his desk, open his inbox, field 2 mildly irritating requests from a manager who spoke to him like he was furniture, and whatever had happened the night before simply ceased to feel true. The old frequency snapped back like a rubber band. Same station, same static, same broadcast of not quite enough, not quite the right person, not quite yet. The night work was real. The failure was in the morning. What David had not yet built was what this chapter calls the morning verification loop. And the word verification is precise here. Not affirmation, not repetition, not recitation. Verification. The difference matters enormously. Affirmation asks you to declare something you hope is true. Verification asks you to confirm something you already know happened. The emotional texture is completely different. And your nervous system reads that texture before it reads the words. Here is how it works, and why 2 minutes is all it takes when done correctly. The moment you reach the edge of sleep and the edge of waking, that threshold state where your body is horizontal and your eyes are closed but your awareness is beginning to stir, your subconscious is at its most porous. This is the same quality that makes the pre-sleep window powerful, running in reverse. What you receive in that first 30 to 60 seconds of stirring consciousness lands with unusual depth. Researchers who study sleep inertia describe this state as a period of reduced prefrontal filtering. Your inner critic is still loading. Your doubts have not yet booted up. For a brief window, you are closer to your deeper programming than at almost any other point in the day. That window is your morning proof, before the phone, before you know what time it is, before your first full thought about the day, while you are still in the warmth and looseness of the threshold. You do one thing. You ask a single confirming question, not an affirmation of what you want. A quiet internal question about what already changed while you slept. The question is this: what do I know now that I did not know yesterday? Let that question move through you. Do not force an answer. Do not construct one. The point is not the intellectual answer. The point is the posture the question creates inside you. The orientation of someone checking their work rather than starting from scratch. The posture of a person who went somewhere last night and is now reporting back. That posture is the confirmation signal. It tells the nervous system that last night was real, that the print held, that the image developed. 30 seconds. That is all that takes. You are still horizontal. The room is still quiet. The second element is physical, and it lasts another 30 to 45 seconds. You place one hand flat against your chest, over your sternum, and you breathe deliberately 3 times. Not deep, not theatrical. Slow and even 3 full cycles. While you breathe, you hold a single image. Not a vision board, not a complex scene. One small specific image of an ordinary moment that would only exist if your reprogrammed identity were already fully real. David eventually chose the image of himself sitting at a different desk. A desk he had chosen rather than been assigned, reading a contract he was signing rather than filing. 10 seconds of that image, held with the quiet certainty of someone remembering rather than wishing. Then 2 more breaths. Then you open your eyes. 90 seconds total. The third element is the only one that requires you to be vertical, and it takes another 30 seconds at most. As your feet hit the floor, you say one sentence out loud. Not a mantra, not a declaration, a report. You say it in the past tense, something like, "Last night I settled deeper into who I am becoming, and this morning I carry it forward." The past tense is not accidental. When you speak in present or future tense about an identity you are still building, the critical faculty activates and begins auditing the claim. When you speak in past tense about something that happened during sleep, there is nothing to audit. It already happened. The mind does not argue with the past the same way it argues with the future. 2 minutes. That is the complete loop. Now let the open question from earlier close, because it deserves a direct answer. The reason new beliefs feel vivid at night and distant by noon is not because the reprogramming is shallow. It is because the morning, left unguarded, runs a competing script. The first strong emotional frequency you encounter after waking functions like a reset. It does not erase what the night shift built, but it covers it, like broadcasting a new signal over the same bandwidth. The static your old identity generates is loud. Years of conditioning make it loud. What the morning verification loop does is simple. It broadcasts your new signal first, before the static has a chance to find the frequency. You are not fighting the old identity. You are simply arriving before it does. That is the principle underneath all of this. The night shift rewrites the code. The morning loop runs it. Skip the loop, and the code sits dormant in a file that nothing opens. Run the loop, and by the time your old patterns try to reassert themselves, your new identity has already claimed the day's first moments. In a later section, we will get to a point about repetition and habit formation that breaks with the story most people inherited. After that really registers, it immediately changes how you structure every hour of your life, not just the mornings. But for now, the work is this. Tonight, the window opens again. The sleeping architect will return. The night shift will run. And tomorrow morning, before the world gets a single word in, you will have 2 minutes that belong entirely to the person you are in the process of becoming. The question for the next chapter is not how to make the reprogramming stronger. The question is what happens when the waking world fights back. Chapter 8. Wealth signals your body transmits without permission. Something is leaving you right now. It has nothing to do with your bank account. Every room you walk into, every conversation you begin, every moment where someone decides whether to trust you, offer you something, or pass you over, those moments are decided before you speak a single word. The decision happens in less than 2 seconds. And if your subconscious wealth identity has not been reprogrammed, you are losing those moments every single day. Not occasionally, constantly. The opportunity that never got offered, the contact who never followed up, the deal that went to someone who seemed somehow more like someone it should go to. You were not rejected. You were simply not selected, and you never knew why. That invisible cost compounds the same way interest does, quietly, daily, without mercy. The mechanism behind it is not your resume or your appearance or your confidence level in the traditional sense. It is the signal your body broadcasts before your brain has a chance to manage the impression. This chapter is about what that signal is, how it changes, and what happened when Marcus finally felt the shift. The question is what happens when the waking world fights back. Here is what most people expect when they begin reprogramming their subconscious. They expect to feel different. They expect some internal sunrise, some quiet morning where they wake up and the world looks new. What they do not expect is friction. The waking world does not applaud new programming. It tests it. The people around you have learned exactly how to read your old frequency. When that frequency begins to change, they get confused first and resistant second. Marcus felt that. About 6 weeks into the work, the nightly recalibration, the pre-sleep audio, the slow, deliberate rewiring of his self-concept around money, he did not feel like he was winning. He felt like he was strange. His colleagues noticed something was off before he noticed it himself. Not off badly, just different. A woman named Denise, who had worked beside Marcus for 3 years and had always treated him as a peer in the most neutral possible sense, stopped him in the hallway one Tuesday morning and said, "You seem like you're doing something." That was the whole sentence. You seem like you're doing something. She could not name what it was. She was not flattering him. She was reporting a perception her nervous system had logged before her words caught up. That is where this chapter lives. In that gap, between the signal the body sends and the words anyone uses to describe it. Travel back to life 3 years ago and keep it plain if you are honest about it. Think about the version of you who walked into rooms then. How you held your shoulders. How long you waited before speaking. Whether you leaned into conversations or pulled back slightly, always just slightly, as if part of you was already managing the exit. That posture was not a choice. It was a broadcast, and everyone in those rooms was receiving it whether they could articulate it or not. The body does not lie about identity. It never has. Your nervous system has been encoding your financial self-concept since the first time someone in your household communicated through tone, through silence, through the way they tensed when bills arrived, what money meant and who got to have it. That encoding lives in your musculature. It lives in your eye contact. It lives in the way you breathe when someone asks what you do for work, or what you charge, or what you need. No affirmation you repeat in a mirror will override a nervous system that has had 30 years to learn its posture. That is why the conscious effort loop fails so reliably. You cannot think your way out of a body-deep script, but you can rewrite it while you sleep. Here is the thing that will matter most by the end of this chapter. Marcus did not change his pitch. He did not rehearse better answers. He did not read a book on executive presence or take a communication course. And yet the external results changed first, before he understood why, before he could explain it. The results moved before he had a name for what was moving them. Keep that in your mind as we go further. What the night shift does over accumulated weeks of deep reprogramming is reroute the signal. In the early chapters of this book, you met the image of radio static, that constant low-level noise that drowns a clear signal before it can transmit. Static is not silence. Static is the wrong frequency broadcasting at full volume. What most people carry into every room is the frequency of their oldest financial story, turned all the way up, whether they know it or not. The reprogramming work you have been doing is not adding a new story on top of the old one. It is gradually tuning the dial, moving the frequency, not forcing a signal, finding one. And when the signal clears, even partially, the body picks it up first. Marcus started noticing it in small things. The way he sat down at a table in a meeting had changed. He was not performing confidence. He was not reminding himself to sit straight. He simply arrived in his seat differently, fully, without the slight anticipatory lean that used to telegraph that he was waiting to see how this would go. One of his supervisors, a man named Trevor who had never once invited Marcus to a strategy conversation, asked him to come sit in on a planning call. No explanation, just an assumption that Marcus would add something. Marcus went. He barely spoke, but he was there. It led to a different conversation 3 weeks later, and that conversation led to a project, and that project changed the shape of his year. He had not done anything to make Trevor invite him. That is the revelation most people miss when they start seeing early results. They look for what they did. They want to trace the cause to a decision, a move, an action they took. But the real cause was not a decision. It was the frequency shift, the unconscious signal radiating outward from a subconscious identity that had finally begun to recognize itself as someone who belongs in the room. This is not mysticism. It is behavioral science with a longer time horizon than most self-help books are willing to use. Researchers who study social perception have documented that humans form complex hierarchical assessments of each other within the first 2 seconds of contact. Those assessments are drawn almost entirely from nonverbal data, microexpressions, breathing rate, the quality of stillness or restlessness in the body, the direction and steadiness of gaze. These signals are not chosen. They are produced by the nervous system automatically, based on the identity the nervous system believes it is operating from. Change the identity at the root level and the signals change. Not because you rehearsed them, because they are now true. Watch how your language changes too, because it will. Not the vocabulary, not the strategic deployment of impressive words. The grammar of certainty shifts. People who carry an underearner's identity hedge constantly without knowing it. They say things like, "I was thinking maybe," and "I don't know if this makes sense, but," and "this might be a long shot." Every sentence pre-apologizes for taking up space. This is not a habit you can manually stop. Habits live at the surface. This is a subconscious instruction being handed to the mouth in real time. The instruction says, "Make room for being dismissed because that is probably what is coming." After reprogramming takes hold, that instruction changes. The language becomes cleaner, not aggressive, not overconfident, clean, declarative without being demanding, present without hedging. Marcus told me that the first time he named a number out loud, a number he actually wanted, for a project he had been undercharging on for years, he waited for something bad to happen. He had said higher numbers before and watched the conversation curdle. This time the number landed flat and still, and the other person nodded, not enthusiastically, just acceptingly, as if that was the number the room had been waiting for too. One number, one moment. But underneath it, weeks of night shift rewiring had recalibrated what Marcus believed. at the deepest inarticulate level, that he was worth. Here is the close of that open loop. The reason Marcus's results moved before he had a name for what was moving them is that identity precedes behavior. Always. You do not act your way into a new identity. You cannot. The acting is always downstream of the being, and the being is set quietly and without argument by the subconscious blueprint your sleeping mind holds. What you have been building in this book night by night is a different blueprint, not a fantasy, a frequency, a stable, coherent, internal signal that your body then broadcasts without asking for your permission and without needing it. The waking world does not fight back forever. It recalibrates to you, slowly at first, then in what feels like a rush. Here is the concrete version of that in real life. People begin to bring you things, introductions, offers, ideas that seem to include you as a natural participant, not because you campaigned for inclusion. Because the signal you transmit has shifted enough that you now read as someone to bring things to. The old static has cleared enough that your actual frequency is coming through. And what your actual frequency says, what it has always said beneath the noise, is that you are someone who builds, who holds, who grows, who deserves the room. You have always been transmitting. The question was never whether to transmit. The question was always what signal was getting through. Before long, we will get to a point about timing, about when the right moment to act is that breaks with the story most people inherited. Once that becomes real to you, it immediately changes how you decide which doors to walk through. But for now, stay with what this chapter has given you. The signal changes before the results do. The body speaks before the bank account does. The sleeping architect reshapes the waking broadcast. And you do not need to manage the impression once the identity underneath it is finally true. What does it cost you to keep broadcasting static one more year? Chapter 9. Static was always a frequency you chose. Every era of human civilization has produced a small number of people who stopped fighting the noise inside them and started listening to it instead. In every culture, on every continent, across every generation of people who have ever sat quietly with their own minds, there exists this same strange discovery. The disruption was never the enemy. The friction was never the punishment. The static, that constant, grinding interference that seemed to block everything good, was information. It was signal wearing the wrong clothes. You have been inside this book long enough now to feel that truth moving toward you. Something is about to flip. The question is not whether you are capable of tuning the dial. The question is whether you are willing to believe that the dial was always yours to hold. That question will stay with you through this chapter. Don't reach for the answer yet. Let it sit. 1 year, that is what it costs. 1 year of broadcasting the same old signal and believing the reception is just poor luck. You already felt the weight of that question at the end of the last chapter. What does it cost you to keep broadcasting static 1 more year? Not in abstract dollars, in the specific texture of your days, the thing you postpone, the conversation you avoid. The version of yourself you keep promising is just around the corner. The cost is not dramatic. That is what makes it so dangerous. It doesn't announce itself. It accumulates quietly, the way sediment builds at the bottom of still water. Until one morning you notice the water is no longer clear and you cannot remember when it changed. Here is the reframe this chapter exists to deliver. Static is not silence. Static is not the absence of signal. Static is a frequency, a specific, measurable, reproducible frequency that your internal broadcast system generates when 2 things are happening at once. You are trying to receive something new and your old programming is still transmitting. Both signals are real. Both are loud. And when they collide inside you, what you hear is interference, what you call bad luck, what you call being behind, what you call not being built for this. But interference is not failure. Interference is proof that two signals are active. Bring to mind the person you were from 3 years back without polishing the memory. Not your career, not your bank balance, go deeper than that. Think about the internal conversation you were having with yourself on an average Tuesday. The way you narrated your own financial life when no one was listening. Were you explaining why things were hard, or were you deciding what to do about them? 3 years ago, which broadcast was louder inside you? Because that broadcast, whatever it was, shaped the 3 years that followed. Not your effort, not your intentions. The frequency you were running on while you slept. That is the mirror. Hold it a moment. Now let's talk about a woman named Dara. Dara had spent 6 years in the same career loop. Competent, respected at work, always one position away from the financial breathing room she needed. Every 2 years she would get a raise, feel briefly hopeful, and then watch that hope dissolve as her expenses quietly rose to meet the new number. She told herself this was how life worked. She told herself she was being realistic. She was very proud of being realistic. One afternoon, Dara was replacing an old radio in her kitchen. The dial was rusted. Every station came in as static except one, a talk station that faded in and out depending on where she stood in the room. She spent 20 minutes adjusting her position, tilting her head, leaning toward the window, all trying to receive the signal that was already broadcasting. The station was not broken. The transmission was not broken. The reception was limited by the equipment she was using and where she had placed herself. She sat down at her kitchen table and wrote a single line in her notebook. I have been standing in the wrong position to receive what is already broadcasting. That sentence did not change Dara's salary. Not that afternoon. But it changed the internal story she was telling herself about why her financial life looked the way it did. Once the story changed, the night shift began. The sleeping architect started working with new blueprints instead of the old ones. Within 14 months, Dara had made 3 decisions she would not have previously considered possible. Each one moved her closer to the breathing room she had wanted for 6 years. The station was always broadcasting. She moved. This is the thing about static that nobody tells you. You were never stuck in a broken system. You were a receiver with a fixed position and a rusted dial, receiving exactly the signal your calibration allowed. Every financial ceiling you ever hit was a reception ceiling, not a transmission ceiling. The wealth signal was broadcasting. Your subconscious equipment was simply tuned to filter it out, because at some point early, formative, before you had any conscious say in the matter, your internal system decided that filtering it out was safer. Safer. That is the word that matters here. Your subconscious doesn't want money. It wants safety. And if your earliest programming associated money with conflict, with loss, with people leaving or people fighting or never having enough, then the subconscious that has been running your night shift all these years has been protecting you from the very thing you consciously want. That is not malfunction. That is devotion, misguided, costly devotion. But here is what has changed. You are now the one holding the dial, not the child who absorbed those early frequencies without choosing them, not the younger version of you who mistook static for destiny. You, right now, awake to what the noise actually was, reading the frequencies for the first time with eyes that can see what they are. This is where the open loop closes. You have been carrying a question since the first chapter of this book. You may not have named it consciously, but it was there, underneath every page. The question was, if the subconscious runs so much of this, then what is my actual role? If the night shift does the deep work, if the sleeping architect draws the blueprints, then am I just watching? Am I passive in my own financial life? No. You are the one who chooses the station. You cannot force the subconscious to rebuild its wiring in a single afternoon, but you can consciously, deliberately, repeatedly feed it a different signal at the threshold of sleep, when the analytical mind steps back and the deeper architecture becomes briefly accessible. You can choose what plays during the night shift. You can hand the sleeping architect new blueprints instead of the same worn plans it has been working from for years. That is not passive. That is the most active thing you will ever do, because you are not pushing harder. You are not grinding through resistance. You are changing what the resistance is made of. The static was never proof that you were broken. It was proof that two signals were running. The old one built without your permission, and the new one which you are building now deliberately in the quiet hours when the world goes still and the sleeping architect picks up its tools. Down the line in this book, we will get to a point about consistency and discipline that breaks with the story most people inherited. When that idea snaps into focus, it immediately changes how you act every single morning. But right now, the only thing that matters is this. You were never receiving static because the universe had nothing to offer you. You were receiving static because you were standing in the wrong position, holding a dial you didn't know was yours to turn. The dial is in your hand now. What will you choose to broadcast tonight? Chapter 10. The Sleeper Who Woke Someone Else. You have made it to the last night, and something in you already knows this chapter is different, not because the words will be louder or the ideas more complex, because you are different from the person who pressed play on Chapter 1. You may not feel it yet. The changes working their way through you rarely announce themselves. But here is what I want to ask you directly, honestly, with nothing but respect for how far you have come. Are you going to let this be another thing you finished and then set down? Another insight that lived in your mind for a few days before the noise of ordinary life rose up and covered it over. You know the pattern. You have lived it before. The difference this time is not the quality of what you learned. The difference is whether you are willing to claim a new identity around it. That is the only door left. And this chapter is the threshold. Here is the open loop you should carry into the next few minutes. Throughout this book, there has been a question no chapter fully answered. The question is this: who does the work while you sleep? Hold that. The answer is coming, and when it arrives, it will land differently than you expect. Think back to where you were when you first encountered the radio static metaphor. A signal already broadcasting beneath the noise, already present, already transmitting something about who you are and what you believe money means. Back then, the static felt like the problem. It felt like interference. You wanted to silence it so you could finally hear something clean. But here, near the end, you understand that the static was never random. It was a broadcast. Chaotic, yes. Unintentional, yes. But it was the voice of your old identity filling the frequency while you slept, while your defenses were down, while the subconscious was wide open and waiting to be told what to believe. You spent years grinding against that broadcast without knowing it existed. That is not a failure. That is simply what happens when nobody shows you the dial. The sleeping architect. You have heard this phrase before, but now it means something it did not mean in Chapter 1. An architect does not move bricks. An architect decides what gets built. Every night, something in you was making decisions about the shape of your financial life, and you were not in the room for the meeting. The conscious effort loop told you the solution was to work harder, plan better, want it more. And you did all of those things. The effort was real. But effort applied against a blueprint you never examined is just expensive decoration on a faulty foundation. What you have been building through this book is access to the room where the meetings happen. Now close your eyes for a moment, or let the words wash over you if you are in motion. Turn back to life 3 years ago and keep it plain, financially and emotionally. Think about the ceiling you were pressing against. Think about how certain you were that trying harder was the answer. Then think about how little changed. Not because you were not trying, because the architect downstairs was quietly undoing your work every night. That is the mirror moment, not to cause pain, but to make the contrast visible, because the contrast is exactly what makes the new identity feel real. Here is the revelation this entire book has been building toward, quietly, across every chapter, every story, every metaphor. The person who understands sleep as a financial act stops dividing their life into productive time and recovery time. Recovery is not a break from the work. Recovery is a different kind of work, done by a different part of you, at a depth your waking mind cannot reach. When you close your eyes tonight with intention, with a clear signal, a settled nervous system, a deliberate thought placed at the edge of consciousness, you are not resting. You are sending your most capable collaborator into the foundation to do what no amount of daytime hustle can replicate. You are programming the blueprint. That is the answer to the open loop. That is who does the work while you sleep. You do. A version of you that is older than your habits, deeper than your doubts, and far more capable than the part of you that scrolls through comparison and worry at midnight. The static is tunable. It always was. Now let me take you somewhere. 6 months from now, you wake up on an ordinary Tuesday. No alarm or close to it. The room is quiet. Before you reach for your phone, you notice something. The first thought in your mind is not a rehearsal of everything that could go wrong. It is not a list of debts or a calculation of distance between where you are and where you want to be. The first thought is something closer to readiness, a settled, practical readiness, the kind that does not need to announce itself. You get up. You move through the morning without the low-grade static of financial dread that used to hum beneath everything. Not because the numbers are all solved. Numbers are never all solved, but because your relationship to those numbers has changed at the root. Decisions that used to feel paralyzing feel manageable. Opportunities that used to feel like risks meant for other people feel like reasonable bets. You do not need someone to tell you this is working. You feel it in how you speak about money in casual conversation, in how you respond when a door closes, in how long it takes you to recover from a setback. You recover faster. You orient forward faster. The script running underneath has been rewritten, one night at a time, and the compound interest of that rewriting is showing up in your waking hours without you having to force it. Your nights are no longer wasted hours between effort and effort. They are the engine, and you know how to run it. This is what it means to be the sleeper who woke someone else. Not a stranger, not a future version of yourself painted in vague aspiration. The person you woke is the one who was already inside you, already capable, already holding the frequency you could not hear through the noise. You did not create a new self. You cleared the static long enough for the real signal to come through. And that person, the one receiving the signal now, does not sleep the same way you used to sleep. Tonight, and every night that follows, rest is your most honest financial act.